buttercup, you're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall, won't stop till I get enough.
All right, so let's jump right into it. This breaking news coming out of South Korea.
Yeah.
President Yoon Suk-yeol declaring martial law.
Yeah, I know.
It's kind of a crazy thing to see, a U.S. ally and
Absolutely.
big player on the world stage making a move like this.
Yeah, it really is extraordinary. And I think to understand just how big of a deal this is, you need to think back a little bit on South Korea's history with democracy.
Right.
It's a relatively recent development. They transitioned from authoritarian rule to a multi-party system in the late 1980s.
Right.
So this martial law declaration, it's not just some political maneuver.
Yeah.
It's dredging up a lot of sensitive historical baggage for a lot of Koreans.
Wow. Yeah, that puts things into perspective. It's like way more than just a headline.
Absolutely.
It's tapping into some really deep societal nerves.
Yeah. So what exactly did Yoon say to justify such a drastic step?
Well, in his late night address, he said it was necessary to protect South Korea from what he called communist forces in North Korea.
But he also pointed a finger at anti-state elements within South Korea itself.
Okay, anti-state elements. That sounds pretty vague.
Right.
What is he talking about there?
He's talking about the opposition Democratic Party, which right now they've got a majority in the National Assembly. That's South Korea's parliament.
Right.
And they have been very fiercely opposing Yoon's government. They've even been trying to impeach officials and block his whole legislative agenda.
So there was some bad blood already brewing.
Oh, yeah?
Before this martial law thing blew up. What were they actually fighting about?
Well, there were a number of major points of friction.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party, they lean left.
Okay.
And they've been pushing back against what they see as Yoon's increasingly authoritarian tendencies and his really hardline stance on North Korea.
Yeah.
For example, they opposed his proposed increase in military spending.
Okay.
And they really did not like his tough rhetoric towards North Korea. They also argued that his economic policies weren't doing enough to address income inequality and support the working class.
So it's not just a power struggle then.
Yeah.
There's like a genuine ideological divide.
Absolutely.
And this tension's been building for a while, right?
Oh, yeah. For a while, Yoon's popularity has been plummeting for months now.
Right.
You remember the tragic Itaewon Halloween crowd crush? Over 150 lives lost.
Horrible.
His government's response was widely criticized as being too slow and inadequate.
Right.
Then there was the Dior bag controversy involving his wife, accused of accepting an expensive gift which could violated anti-graft laws.
Wow.
All this, along with his policies, has fueled public dissatisfaction and eroded trust in his leadership.
So it wasn't just one thing. It was like death by 1,000 cuts for his public image.
Exactly.
And then to make matters worse, the Democratic Party won a landslide victory in the April parliamentary elections. Talk about a message.
That was a message loud and clear.
From the people?
Public was not happy with Yoon's direction.
Right.
And it really shifted the balance of power, giving the Democratic Party even more leverage to challenge him. And this is crucial context, I think, for understanding why the martial law declaration has been met with such resistance. It's not just about the decree itself. It's about a president who many feel has overstepped his boundaries and just lost the people's trust.
Right. Okay, so we've got this backdrop of a president with dwindling support, deep political divisions. And a history that makes this martial law thing extra sensitive.
Right.
So let's get into what this decree actually means.
Okay.
What did it actually change?
Well, it was pretty sweeping. It banned all political activities, rallies, protests, you name it.
Wow.
Even meetings of political parties were off limits.
Okay.
It also prohibited strikes and work stoppages, which was a big deal because doctors were in the middle of a walkout at the time.
So it was basically shutting down any form of dissent or organized opposition.
Yeah.
It's pretty heavy-handed.
Very much so, and there's more. The decree allowed for arrests without warrants.
Okay.
And this is where things really alarming. Gave the government the power to silence anyone they saw as a threat.
Wow.
With very little oversight or due process.
Yeah, I can see why people would be drawing comparisons to South Korea's authoritarian past.
Yeah.
But here's the thing I don't get. If Yoon was already on such shaky ground, why make such a provocative move?
Right.
Wouldn't that just backfire?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. Some analysts think it was a desperate attempt to cling to power silence his critics, and consolidate control. Others suggest maybe it was a miscalculation.
Okay.
He underestimated the public backlash and the opposition's resolve.
Yeah.
Whatever the reason. It's definitely plunged South Korea into a level of political turmoil that they haven't seen in decades.
And it's not just the opposition he has to worry about, right? Didn't some members of his own party speak out against this?
Yes. Even the leader of Yoon's own political party, Han Dong-hoon, publicly criticized the martial law declaration, called it wrong.
Wow.
And vowed to block it.
So he's basically alienated everyone at this point.
It seems that way.
The opposition, the public, and now his own party.
Yeah.
So what happened next?
Well, the National Assembly, they called an emergency late-night session to address the situation.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. Spill it.
They did. And in that session, lawmakers from both sides came together and voted unanimously to block the martial law decree.
Unanimous vote.
The National Assembly chairman, he declared the decree invalid.
Okay.
And emphasized that Yoon was legally obligated to comply with the parliament's vote.
Okay.
It was really a remarkable display of democratic checks and balances.
Oh, unanimous vote against the president. That's got a sting.
It does send a strong message.
Yeah. So did Yoon back down? I mean, legally he had to, right?
Yeah. Legally, yes, he was obligated to respect Parliament's decision.
Yeah.
But Yoon has this reputation for being very stubborn and uncompromising.
Yeah.
And so far, he hasn't publicly said anything about the vote or indicated whether he plans to comply or not.
So we've got this, like, standoff.
It creates this really dangerous level of uncertainty and tension.
Yeah, this isn't just some abstract legal debate. This has real-world consequences.
Right.
You mentioned troops had been deployed.
Yeah.
What happened there? Did they pack up and go home?
Well, there were reports that troops had entered the Parliament building after the martial law declaration, and that they did start withdrawing after the vote.
Okay.
And there were actually eyewitness accounts of people outside the building.
Wow.
Celebrating the lawmakers' decision. Some even called for Yoon to resign.
Wow. So it was a real showdown.
It was a dramatic scene.
Between the branches of government.
Yeah, a real showdown.
So we've got this constitutional standoff. A president defying the will of the troops on the streets. What does this mean for ordinary South Koreans? How are they reacting to all this chaos?
Well, reports from Seoul indicate the mood is one of shock and confusion.
Yeah.
This kind of action is unheard of in democratic South Korea.
Right.
People are concerned. They're rushing to be with their families.
Understandably.
Trying to make sense of what this means for their future.
I'm sure the financial markets are freaking out right now.
Yeah.
What's the economic fallout of all this?
Well, as you can imagine, there's been a significant negative reaction.
Yeah.
South Korean stocks took a nosedive in U.S. trading after the martial law declaration.
Okay.
And there's a lot of uncertainty about what's going to happen when the South Korean stock exchange opens.
Yeah.
Investors are really spooked by the political instability and the potential for long-term economic damage.
Political uncertainty and economic instability, not exactly a recipe for success.
No, not at all.
But this isn't just a South Korean issue, right?
Right.
This has implications for the entire region, especially given their relationship with the U.S.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, so this situation has global implications, particularly for the United States, which considers South Korea a key ally.
Right.
Remember, there are tens of thousands of American troops.
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
Stationed in South Korea as a deterrent against North Korean aggression.
Right.
So
how does this political crisis potentially impact those troops and the U.S.-South Korea alliance?
Well, first, it raises concerns about South Korea's stability and reliability as a partner.
Okay.
A weakened or internally divided South Korea is less able to contribute to regional security and could embolden North Korea to act more aggressively.
That's scary.
Yeah.
What are some specific actions that North Korea might take advantage of with this situation?
It's impossible to say for sure.
Yeah.
But North Korea has a history of exploiting these moments of weakness or distraction.
Right.
In the South, they could increase military exercises near the border, conduct more missile tests, maybe even engage in cyber attacks or other provocations.
And their goal there would be to?
The goal would be to sow further discord in the South and maybe undermine the U.S.-South Korea alliance.
What about the U.S. response? Have they said anything about this?
Well, we know that the U.S. has been in contact with the South Korean government, expressing concern and urging restraint.
Right.
But the U.S. is in a tricky position. Yeah. They don't want to be seen as interfering in South Korea's internal affairs, but they also have a huge interest in maintaining stability and security in the region.
It's a tough balancing act.
It is.
Okay, so the stakes are incredibly high here, not just for South Korea, but for the entire region and U.S. interests.
Yes, for sure.
It's like this whole thing's a powder keg waiting to explode. But let's step back for a second and talk about what this all means for South Korean democracy.
Okay.
What are the long-term implications of this whole crisis?
It's really hard to predict the future. But this crisis has definitely exposed deep divisions within South Korean society.
Yeah.
And those divisions aren't going to just disappear overnight.
Right.
It's also raised some serious questions about the strength of their democratic institutions.
So is this a sign that South Korean democracy is backsliding?
Yeah.
Or could this actually be a catalyst for positive change?
You know, it really could go either way.
Okay.
On the one hand, the fact that the parliament stood up to the president and blocked the martial law decree, that's encouraging.
Yeah.
It shows that the system of checks and balances is working, at least to some extent.
Yeah.
And maybe this crisis will serve as a wake-up call for citizens to get more engaged in protecting their democratic rights.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the level of distrust in the government is deeply concerning.
So it's like a fork in the road for South Korea.
It really is.
And I imagine this whole ordeal has left a lot of South Koreans feeling disillusioned and anxious about the future. But what about the rest of us?
Yeah.
What can we learn from this South Korean drama?
Well, for one, it's a reminder that even in seemingly stable democracies, things can change really quickly.
Right.
The events of the past few days have been a wake-up call, highlighting the fragility of democratic norms and the importance of vigilance and safeguarding them.
Right. It's like that saying, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance.
Absolutely.
We can't afford to be complacent or take our democratic institutions for granted.
Absolutely.
But it's not all doom and gloom, right? There must be some positive takeaways from this whole mess.
Yeah, I think one of the most inspiring aspects of this crisis has been the courage and resilience of the South Korean people.
Right.
Despite the uncertainty and fear, they've shown a real determination to defend their democracy and hold their leaders accountable.
It's a powerful message. It's like even in the face of authoritarian threats, the spirit of democracy can still shine through. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the South Korean crisis, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this? It feels like we covered a lot here.
Yeah.
Scandals, troop movements, global fallout.
A lot going on.
What's the one takeaway you hope our listener gets from all this?
I think the big lesson is that leadership matters.
Yeah.
A leader who is out of touch with the people disregards democratic processes.
Right.
They can really damage a country's stability and its future.
It's true. And I think for those of us living in stable democracies, it's easy to think this could never happen to us.
Right.
But the South Korean situation really shows those norms are more fragile than we think.
Absolutely. It's a wake-up call to stay engaged, to pay attention to what's happening both at home and around the world, because the erosion of democracy often starts subtly.
Right.
Small compromises, insignificant power grabs.
Yeah.
And if we're not careful, it can snowball into something dangerous.
Okay, so where do things go from here?
Right.
What are some possible scenarios for South Korea in the coming weeks?
Well, one possibility is that Yoon backs down, complies with the parliament's vote, and lifts the martial law decree. But that seems unlikely given what we know about him.
Yeah.
A more likely scenario is that he digs in his heels, refuses to comply.
Okay.
And then we see a full-blown constitutional crisis.
Yikes. A constitutional crisis.
Yeah.
What would that look like?
Imagine a standoff between the president and the parliament,
Right.
maybe with the military caught in the middle.
Yeah.
It could lead to a government shutdown legal battles
Right.
and an even bigger erosion of public trust.
Right.
In the worst case scenario, it could escalate into violence or social unrest.
That's scary. We also can't forget about North Korea.
Right. Sure.
They must be loving this.
Absolutely. They see this internal turmoil as a chance to take advantage.
Right.
Maybe increase military provocations, ramp up their rhetoric, or even try to interfere in South Korean politics.
Sorry. A lot of potential for things to get worse before they get better.
Yeah, it's possible.
But, you know, throughout this whole conversation, what struck me is the courage of the South Korean people.
I agree.
They faced down authoritarianism before, and it seems like they're ready to do it again.
Those images of citizens rallying in support of the parliament, calling for Yoon to respect the rule of law.
Right.
Those are powerful. It shows that despite the challenges, the democratic spirit's alive and well in South Korea.
It's a reminder that the fate of democracy rests not just with leaders, but with the people. It's up to all of us to be informed, to talk to each other, and to hold our leaders accountable.
Absolutely. And to never take our freedoms for granted.
Yeah, because as we've seen, those freedoms are hard-won and can be lost if we're not careful.
So true.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive.
Yeah.
This has been a heavy but really important conversation. And to our listeners out there, we encourage you to keep learning about this.
Yeah, keep researching.
Seek out different perspectives and form your own conclusions.
Absolutely.
The situation in South Korea is still developing.
Right.
And the choices made in the coming days will have a huge impact.
For sure.
On their future and maybe even on the future of democracy itself.
It might.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have